everybody who's participated in this month of storytelling. I wasn't sure when we began, this for the month of April, I wasn't sure if it was a good idea or not. Giving up at the Sunday talk is not something that a minister relishes. And not knowing who's gonna say what or when or how long, But I want to tell you that this has been one of the best things that I think that we have ever done for our center. We got to know people at a different level. We heard stories that touched our hearts. And I really am so grateful to everybody who participated. Reverend Peggy Washington, Reverend Peggy watched it and she sent me an email. She said this should be a yearly thing. And I agree with her. I think it should be. So, for the month of May, I've chosen Lessons from the Land as our theme, because it seems like the land has certain rules and regulations that go with planting and go with the seasons and all that, as well as nature itself. And if we look at those, there's always a lesson in it. It might be a physical lesson from nature, but it's a metaphysical or spiritual lesson for us. So that's why I chose that, Lessons from the Land. And today we begin with our topic, Priming the Pump. And I know you've heard the story before, but I want to start with it so that we can use it as kind of a jumping off point. So there's an old legend about a man who was lost in the desert, and he was dying for a drink of water. And he stumbled upon an old shack. He looked around and he found a little shade from the heat of the desert. And as he looked further, he saw a rusty old water pump about 15 feet away. He stumbled over to it, grabbed the handle, and began to pump and pump, but nothing came out. Then he noticed an old jug to the side of the pump. He picked it up, wiped off the dirt, and read the message that was taped to it. You have to prime the pump with all the water in this jug, and then be sure to fill the jug again before you leave. He popped the cork out of the jug and found it almost full. But now suddenly he has a dilemma. And wouldn't we all? If he drank the water, he could live and be satisfied. But if he poured the water into the old rusty pump, maybe it would give cool water from down deep and he could have even more than what he absolutely bargained for. And so, as he pondered the situation, he reluctantly picked up the jug and poured it over the pump. And then he grabbed the handle and he began to pump. Squeak, squeak, squeak. Nothing happened. Squeak, squeak, squeak. And finally a little bit of water dribbled out, then a stream, and finally the water gushed out. He filled the jug and drank from it. He drank another jug full, filled his water bottle, and then filled up that jug. Put the cork back in and added this note, trust me, this stuff works. Well, in our Tuesday morning coffee with the Rev, we were talking about how the story that Melinda had told this past Sunday, that she called Trusting the Universe, was kind of like the story of the man priming the pump. And I don't want to tell her whole story, but I know a lot of you weren't here, so I'm going to try to give you a Cliff Notes version. So after Peter and Melinda bought their home in Green Valley, they thought of selling their house in Sonoma, Washington, which Melinda had owned for over 20 years. The location was fabulous. It was on a river, close to a freeway. But there were issues. Next door was a junkyard, but with an 8-foot fence and the home's entrance on the opposite side. It had never bothered Melinda. Across the ravine lived an old man who would go on screaming rampages. He had a son who dumped roofing material in the backyard, causing a fire hazard and eventually a fire. And although they were a ways away, across the street were 3 dilapidated rentals. She and Peter, with some hired help, worked in the huge yard, making the garden beautiful, painting the fence and cleaning out her big shop. They left for Green Valley, setting the intention to sell their home with love and appreciation. And during their winter stay in Green Valley, they heard about torrential rains in Sonoma. And when they returned, and have Melinda tell you the whole story, they found out that number one, the rains had washed through and created a beautiful park where the ravine was. The neighbor who owned the junkyard had cleared off all the junk, sold his property to a young couple who were building a new house on it. The rampaging man and his son were evicted, and the city had cleared the area, and the people who owned the rentals decided to upgrade their property. There is no such thing as coincidences. Craig said that last week, and it's absolutely true. Peter returned to Arizona while Melinda negotiated with a realtor. She offered 30 days at 4%, which the realtor reluctantly accepted. And then, originally resisting the realtor's request for upgrades, Melinda finally gave her $2,000 and said, "Do what you need to do." And when she and Peter returned to Sonoma, the home was beautiful, and Melinda began visualizing a young family with children living in it. And on day 30, their house sold for the full asking price to a young family with 3 young children. Okay, that's the story. And if you read it in a book, you would probably think it's fiction. But it isn't. It isn't. You know, at coffee at the Rev, we were talking about the way that the universe has ways of giving us all the abundance that we could ever want. But it cannot do anything for us if we don't do our part in creating the flow. And that means, as Melinda said, we have to trust the process. We have to have faith in something we cannot see. We have to take responsibility for our part, both physically and spiritually, in order for the universe to respond. In other words, we need to treat and move our feet. The man at the pump had to release his fear and trust that the message was correct. But then he had to pump. You know, when I was growing up, my grandparents had a pump. Now they kept it primed, but we still had to pump it to get the water. And that often wasn't, I remember there was a little girl kind of hanging on it because it took every bit of my weight. It was work. And you had to work at it if you wanted a drink of water. But I believe with all my heart and soul that when Melinda and Peter set their intention in love and began the work of making their home beautiful, that they were priming the pump. And that energy, that intention set with love to sell their home began that whole incredible process that happened in their neighborhood, even the torrential rains that created a park. And I've seen situations like this before. When one person steps up to do something, it starts to snowball. I had a friend who mowed the lawn of the elderly couple that lived next door to her, and soon others in the neighborhood were doing the same thing, and what was kind of a messy neighborhood turned out to be very beautiful. Because one person started, one person primed the pump. And Melinda ended her story with the words, "The universe conspired to aid to our success." And I love that concept. We use it in Science of Mind. In fact, I think we have to set a conscious intention, and that to me has more energy than just making a decision. And I think we have to stay focused on that intention in spite of indications to the contrary. You know, the world has a million reasons why we can't do something, why it can't work, why the universe can't work for us. The outside world has a million reasons. Melinda was asked at one of her garage sales, how can you stand to live next to a junkyard? Had she let that thought penetrate her consciousness, it could have adversely affected all the good that the universe was conspiring for her. In Open Your Mind to Receive, Catherine Ponder writes, whatever you notice, you are inviting into your life. Let me think about that for a moment. Whatever we notice, we're inviting into our life. Now, we might just pass by, and so it's not going to stick. But if we notice it, until it becomes apparent in our thought process, then we've invited it. She says, whatever you talk about, you are inviting into your life. Whatever you identify in your thoughts, words, and actions, you are inviting into your life. So you and I might think for a moment, what are we inviting into our life? And if we've invited some things that we probably wish we hadn't, how do we rescind the invitation? And I think that answer is pretty simple. It's in gratitude and it's in blessing. We all know that being grateful is the antidote to anger, fear, frustration. Gratefulness, being grateful, being thankful, squelches all thoughts of limitation or feelings of not enough, not having enough. You can't be grateful and have a lack consciousness at the same time. You just can't. Because the idea of being grateful is looking at all the abundance that we do have. Diane Harmony in 5 Gifts for an Abundant Life says, gratitude is the great multiplier. Giving thanks and appreciating all that we have opens the doors for us to have more. So that's what we are doing when we are being grateful. We are rescinding the invitations to those ideas and thoughts and maybe experiences that we didn't want. And then that gratitude that we have, it spreads out, and then we can bless others. It motivates us to bless others. Our founder, Dr. Ernest Holmes, says we must bear in mind that there is an inflow, and only by permitting an outflow to pass the blessings on do we widen the channel for the inflow. So we're continually having this flow. It's something that's just the natural process if we don't block it. Dr. Dennis Moret Jones writes in this little book, I have it go to Science, How to Speak Science of Mind. He says, in Science of Mind, to bless anyone or anything is to confer and confirm our awareness of God's presence in that which we bless. It is a beneficial practice to bless our food because it reminds us of the source from whence it comes, and our bodies then receive the benefit of that blessing. To bless our relationships means to remember that every person is a sacred being and should be treated as such. To bless our work is to remember God's presence is at the center of every transaction. To bless our world is to confirm our belief that infinite presence is working in and through all people and all events for the highest and best of all concerned. Remembering to bless our lives and the lives of others every day will transform us, them, and our world. So the lesson of the land for this week is to remember to prime the pump, to trust the universe, to have faith in what we cannot see, to accept good with gratitude, and to confer our blessings with love. Thank you, Namaste, and thank you to Linda for the story. Thank you.